We are going to move to the next one, which is the RFA on improving management of symptoms across cancer treatments, RFA. And the subcommittee members are Drs. Lacey, Kolditz, and Bondi, and Dr. Paul Jacobson will present the RFA.
Gee, could I just make a quick comment while they're setting up? Or Doug? Just go. Gee, I just want to make a quick comment. We were just sidebarring here. Yeah, my casual observation is that a lot of these moonshot RFAs are setting up networks and coordinating centers. And simultaneously, we've had a discussion about the need to increase the R01 pool and to support trainees. And there seems to be not a disconnect, but maybe an opportunity within the RFAs, maybe to have a trainee component or to think about the investigator pool for R01s. Just kind of a question.
Ethan, I think that this is one of the problems of having each of these proposals being so discrete. But in the long run, they are coordinated with other kinds of activities. If you're asking, should we have a specific training component in this, that's something that could be taken under consideration. I must say that overall, my view of the Cancer Moonshot is that, for better or worse, training was not a key component of it, because the goal was to take activities that were poised for making more rapid progress, specifically on the order of 10 years of progress in 5. And training, we know, is a long-term effort. It's one of the reasons why, for example, yesterday when I was talking, I highlighted training as a key part of the regular appropriation.
Thank you. So as a reminder, I'm here to discuss this concept about improving management of symptoms across cancer treatments. I'd like to acknowledge my co-collaborator on this, Dr. Ashley Wilder-Smith, as well as the members of the Symptom Research Implementation Team. And this RFA was developed in direct response to Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations regarding symptom management research. The panel noted that the burden of disease and treatment-related symptoms among people with cancer is substantial and that the impact is considerable. That poorly controlled symptoms are associated with treatment non-adherence, particularly to oral medications, treatment delays, and treatment discontinuation, which in turn contribute to increased risk of disease recurrence and mortality. Poorly controlled symptoms are major contributors to emergency room visits, for example, for pain, nausea, and vomiting, many of which result in costly, unscheduled hospitalizations. And from patients' perspectives, these adverse symptoms have a major impact on their physical and social functioning. Among patients who successfully complete treatment, poorly controlled symptoms are associated with lower rates of return to work, and those who attempt to return to work, impaired ability to work. The burden of symptoms can be eased for many patients, but there are two major barriers to more effective symptom control. The one is that symptoms are not being systematically assessed and reported. We heard yesterday about tools that are used in clinical research for capturing this information, patient-reported outcome measures, but they're not being used in many practice settings. And even when these data are collected, they may not facilitate symptom control unless the information is available at the point of contact in the electronic health record. The other major barrier is that symptoms are often not adequately managed. Many providers have limited awareness of existing clinical practice guidelines that have been written for most of the major cancer symptoms. And many report difficulty accessing the resources needed to carry out guideline recommendations. The panel concluded that this situation in large part reflects the lack of systematic efforts to translate research into practice. We now have several randomized controlled trials demonstrating the benefits of integrated symptom assessment and reporting systems, positive impact on outcomes such as quality of life, the ability to administer the prescribed course of therapy, and as Dr. Bash recently demonstrated, improved survival among patients with advanced disease. And so what's needed now is an approach, an implementation science approach, to translate these research findings and these guidelines into routine clinical practice, illustrated here as T3 translational research. I'd like to take a few moments to illustrate the potential for these integrated systems to transform symptom management. At present, in many clinical situations, the approach to symptom management is one that's been described as reactive. That to a large part, clinicians rely on patients to report what symptoms they're experiencing and how severe they are. And we know that this results in underreporting of symptoms and poor management of symptoms. Imagine instead that patients have been asked to complete a brief symptom inventory, a patient-reported outcome measure, before this clinical encounter, and that this information was collected electronically and was available in the electronic health record just like routine lab results. We know from research that this will lead to better recognition of symptoms and improved patient-provider communication about symptoms. And at this point, both patient and provider would benefit from access to evidence-based recommendations for how to manage specific symptoms. And again, here technology can aid in form of computerized decision support that identifies specific recommendations from guidelines and identifies resources that can be used to carry out those recommendations. And consistent with this more proactive approach, the Blue Ribbon panel recommended a research investment to accelerate the clinical adoption of these integrated systems that both gather and monitor patient-reported symptoms and provide evidence-based decision support. To fulfill this recommendation, we are proposing to create a research network that will serve as a laboratory for studying different models for how to adopt these systems as part of routine clinical practice. Systems that are scalable, transferable, and sustainable for monitoring the systems in routine clinical practice, generating rigorous evidence of their impact on major incomes seen here, and using the power of a research network to evaluate the effects of these different models across different symptoms, different points on the cancer continuum, and importantly in minority and medically underserved populations. In addition to generating findings about the effects of adopting these systems on outcomes, the project is expected to yield materials that can be used for other practices that wish to adopt these systems once the effort is over. Here's an overview of the research network. We're proposing 3 research centers so that we have a diversity of models reflecting the diversity of practices and diversity of patient populations, which will increase both the generalizability and the usability of the results. And a coordinating center, which we believe is necessary for the integration of data across the 3 centers and for synchronizing the research activities across the centers. These efforts will be overseen by a steering committee with representation from the research centers, the coordinating center, and involvement from NCI, giving our scientific expertise in this area and our experience overseeing large-scale projects of this type. Each of the research centers will be charged with developing and evaluating a model for adoption of an integrated symptom management system. This will likely involve refining existing electronic systems for gathering symptom information and adapting existing decision support tools. Deploying these systems in networks of practices using implementation science principles which stress early engagement with key stakeholders, here both providers and patients, to ensure adoption. And particularly demonstrating the effects in under-resourced or community settings where there may be limited on-site resources currently for symptom management, and especially in diverse patient populations. To address different symptoms at different points on the cancer continuum, and we identify at least 3 points on the continuum right here. When symptoms arise during treatment with curative intent, typically early-stage patients, initial line of treatment, treatment without curative intent for patients with advanced or progressive disease, and residual symptoms following successful completion of treatment during what's been called a survivorship period. The projects also need to identify extent of adoption and contributors to success so that these models can be replicated in other practices, and importantly, to evaluate the impact using randomized designs. And since these are practice-level interventions, the unit of randomization will likely be the practice. We see the coordinating center as adding value to the individual research activities in several ways. In the early stages of the project, the coordinating center can promote information sharing about successes and challenges in finalizing these systems and in engaging stakeholders, and in facilitating data integration and monitoring of key project metrics. In the later stages of the project, play a key role in performing the pooled analyses across cost-cutting issues and creating public data sets for use of this valuable resource by outside investigators. We conducted analysis of NIH grants in this area. We identified 2 existing symptom management research centers, but as you can see here, neither one of them has a cancer focus. And we identified several R01s that are testing symptom management interventions, but again, all are focused on very specific strategies and none focus on the Blue Ribbon panel goal of developing scalable, sustainable, or transferable models for clinical practice. I've provided here a breakdown of the proposed budget. The research centers will be funded under UM1 mechanisms, the coordinating center under a U24 mechanism, and this will roll up to a year 1 set-aside request of $6 million and a total estimated cost for the project over the 5-year period of $30 million. We've divided the criteria for success of this RFA into those that are short-term, intermediate, and long-term. In the short term, we look for the successful formation of a coordinated research effort, as demonstrated by the standardization and harmonization of key methodology, and the ability to integrate data on both processes and outcomes of care. In the intermediate term, years 2 to 5, the timely completion of major milestones, evidence that the networks are integrating and implementing the systems on schedule, and the achievement of targets for data collection. And in the long term, the dissemination of high-impact findings, publications showing the effects of the implementation across diverse settings, diverse patient populations on these key outcomes. Almost equally important, the creation and distribution of how-to methods and materials so that practices that want to replicate these models of adoption can do so once the project is over. And finally, compelling real-world evidence that can inform national policies and standards about symptom assessment and management. We were able to speak with the members of the BSA subcommittee last week to get some preliminary feedback from Drs. Lacey, Koldis, and Bondi, and they identified 3 issues that we'd like to provide some clarification about. One is the functions of the coordinating center, and we want to make it clear that these go beyond the usual functions of such centers to form as a data integration hub, and that the center will be providing real-time data monitoring and integration through regular feeds from source applications. Also, the issue of standardization within and across research centers, which is important to some extent to be able to detect the effects of implementing these models. And so we want to clarify that each of the research centers applying must demonstrate that they have a well-integrated electronic health record in all the practices, that they have evidence of a robust clinical informatics infrastructure, and that they will be using the same integrated system across practices within each research center. And across centers, we want to clarify that the steering committee will be charged with identifying very early on opportunities to increase standardization in outcome measurement. They also raised the issue of health disparities, and though I know we're not here to discuss review criteria, I think consistent with the template, each research center application will be evaluated to a certain extent about its ability to address disparities in the network it is studying. Thank you very much.
Jim.
Thank you. It was a nice presentation. Dr. Koldis, Dr. Bondi, and myself discussed the concept with you on June 7th, had a good productive phone call, longer than we thought, but because it was a good discussion. Overall, a significant amount of enthusiasm among the 3 of us for this concept is clearly aligned with the Cancer Moonshot. In addition to the 3 clarifications that you mentioned, which cover a lot of the ground that we had discussed, 2 things additionally came up. One, Dr. Koldis raised the issue that implementation science was mentioned in the concept, but wasn't really flushed out. And that, as you hint, will be a key component of this. And I think the importance of making that clear in the RFA is something we discussed. It sounds like that's something you agree with. The second point is one that I might ask you to clarify. The concept discussed requiring the sites to do a clinical trial of implementing at one site with one site without. We talked about that, and from a sort of conceptual standpoint, pardon the pun, if a site or a network implements these PROs in the kind of integrated informatics-based way that you describe, which is the right way to go, there's a question of would they sort of stop and enable some or allow some of the sites to not go that full route, and would that opportunity for those types of trials exist? So I may ask you in a moment to clarify whether that's still part of the plan. And then the third point, Ethan, you beat me to it a moment ago. I think 5 of these 9 proposals or concepts propose this general structure of coordinating center and then sites. And it's a little concerning to me that I didn't see consistent language about precisely what that coordinating center is going to do. I think that's an NCI issue of, as you roll these out, it's clear this network and the collaboration is important to so many of these things. But there are some standard cross-cutting themes that I think could be part of the standard component of what we see in a coordinating center. You hinted at them in your clarifications in response to the subcommittee, and I sort of hinted at the question before, but we saw it yesterday in the pro-CTCAE concept. As you think about trying to capture data and standardize clinical workflows, clinical outcomes across diverse settings, in diverse populations, then to me, a lot of those coordinating centers will end up tackling the same issues, and you'll see it here. And I think that's a real opportunity for NCI to take the moonshot and try to standardize that. I'll ask Dr. Kolditz and Dr. Bondi to add anything that I did not cover, but overall, I think an interesting concept, some responsive additions and changes, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Kolditz. Anything else?
I think you actually summarize all our discussion, and putting this presentation in the context of the other proposals we've seen. This has come a lot further on implementation science as a theme here than we saw in some of the others yesterday. So I think I downplay that a little. But at the same time, how the study section, i.e. the announcement to start, actually gets translated to be more than just a simple randomized trial, ignoring the broader context issues, whether we need some of that language actually at the time of the RFA, not necessarily now, to make sure the IS component really drives this, and not just can we get the individual practices to change and ignore the bigger picture.
Yeah, let me just add a few comments. Jim, you had a nice summary, I think, of our discussion, and Graham as well. I think one of the things that we discussed with the randomized trial was to, if there was successes, or at least in the short term, that the groups learn from those and work together. And I think that that's what we did talk about. That's important here is to monitor with the NCI group, as well as with the coordinating center, to monitor the progress, because if something works in different settings, it will be important in the long term to be able to implement those types of things quickly.
So if I could just briefly respond, absolutely. I think a key component of this is the sharing of information about what works. To get to the issue of randomization, again, the level of randomization will be the practice. And my colleagues here know that one such design, likely we're going to get applications like this, is what's called a step wedge design, where eventually every practice will implement this, although the order of implementation will be randomized. So you can draw valid conclusions about comparisons, but no practice will necessarily get the message that you will not get this system. It just depends on when you'll get it. I see some head nodding here. Yeah.
I'd like to clarify that before making a motion. Given the timeline that you propose, 5 years, first 2 years, implement it, 3 to 4, collect data, 4 to 5, analyze it. If you think of sort of an integrated health provider network that's going to do that step wedge design, are you confident, you have a pretty good sense that there are those environments out there that would do that on schedule, that would allow you to basically meet all of the aims of this within that 5-year period? And I think, what you're talking about is integration of EMRs, care coordination, decision support, and those are big challenges in population health right now. They are crucial ones, are important, and it's exactly right to tackle them. But a lot of that will be somewhat outside the control of the coordinating center, of the funders here, and it really depends on what happens out in the field in the healthcare setting.
Again, if I briefly respond, I'm aware of several practice networks that have all the raw ingredients to do this, but have not yet put it together, that have very good EHR records, that are beginning to collect patient-reported outcome data, but with a little support from this research, can put all these ingredients together into an integrated system. So I think the timeline is feasible, yes.
Would you like to make a motion for us to discuss?
I would very much like to make a motion to approve and discuss.
Okay, thanks. Okay, open for discussion.
Yeah, this is an important area, so I do like the concept, but I'm a little surprised, particularly in looking at the funding portfolio, that the significant portfolio funding from ONC, PCORI, AHRQ, and NCATS isn't mentioned at all here. One of the things that kind of drives me crazy as both CTSA Associate Director and a Cancer Center Associate Director is the lack of trafficking between these two large major initiatives. So a few points that I think would strengthen the success and probability of this network. It should draw from the successes of both what PCORI and NCATS are doing in patient-reported outcomes, and particularly the pragmatic trials that have been run with the PCORI network. It might even be in school to try to get a few of the people that are going to continue to run PCORI involved in advising this program as you move it forward, because there's no reason you can't draw from all of that work. And in fact, I'm pretty sure when people who are scheduled for defunding from PCORI because of the end of the ACA tax in a couple years, that they'd be layups for this. You've got patient-reported outcomes networks. You've got an infrastructure supported actually out of the NCATS program for survey mechanisms for collecting this kind of data, and it's up and running at over 160 institutions across the country already. So I really think you should draw. Now, from the informatics perspective, it's nice to say that you're going to use a standard implemented EHR, but you should probably put a standard in place, the one that'll likely give you something to do mobily with the EHR, because the EHR vendors aren't going to make any change in 5 years. And it's a standard called FHIR, F-H-I-R. I'd require anyone who pledges allegiance to this RFA to use FHIR to interact between the EHR data and any of the applications. So you should add that standard into the framework. And then last, the data model that the nation is swimming to, including the precision medicine initiatives. You say that you're going to link to other precision medicine initiatives. OMOP as the data model should also be a prescribed requirement. Now, these are two standards that, I get around and see a lot of cancer centers. A lot of cancer centers aren't using. Ours is, as we move forward. It'll dramatically enable talking to these other practice networks to these two standards. So I'd recommend that you add both of these as requirements, both for the trial centers and the coordinating center, and put some language in to actually draw from the very rich experience both at NCATS in setting up their trial innovation networks and their infrastructure and their informatics tools to essentially then enable what you're planning to do with this. And then you'll gain real synergy from millions and millions of dollars spent before this. So FHIR standard, OMOP, and draw from PCORI and ACT current network activities.
Thank you.
Because there is a very rich funding portfolio in this space that you should absolutely build with.
Yes, I've spoken to colleagues at HRQ and PCORI, and point well taken that we really need to link with those efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I got to do one formality. I need a second on the motion before we go on. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we can go.
Thanks. Thanks so much for the excellent presentation. And I would add my very strong support. I think this is, well conceived and timely, and I think will be fruitful and seems very consistent with Moonshot aspirations. I have a couple of very quick questions for you. One is around the EHRs or the EMRs. My perception is that one of the major barriers to integrating patient reporting into clinical workflow is actually EHR functionality. It's very nuts and bolts stuff. And the U.S. market at least is very penetrated, by three major EHR vendors. And I wonder if there's something to additionally trying to use this initiative as a lever to prompt those EHR vendors to improve the PRO functionality, because they've been a little bit slow both on the patient side and on the clinician side, and that's really a major barrier. And what you may wind up seeing with the applicants is that they may work with networks that maybe have a standalone smaller EHR system that's not one of the big three, because it's probably more flexible, but that may not move the bar forward for the majority of centers. So that's just sort of one side thought as an NCI activity. The second question I have is about the networks and the sites. Let's say a site comes in and they want to do something in a large network, with 50 sites, right, that maybe are on a common EHR. Are there enough resources, do you think, to bring online a big network like that, where a lot of the actual implementation nuts and bolts would be necessary? Or are you really looking for smaller proof of concept, networks where maybe they carve out a small piece of that?
I'll respond to the second question. That is, I think it's really more the latter. And I think partly that will be driven by statistical concerns about the number of practices and the number of patients that are needed to have adequate power for the type of cluster design. Ultimately, that would then follow that the other practices in the network would be able to benefit from the lessons learned as part of this implementation study. But in order to be able to really finance the amount of data costs and implementation, it would be in a more limited number of practices. Ideally, those practices would be chosen randomly from the larger network of practices so that we have representation. Yeah.
I just wanted to amplify the earlier comments about implementation science and really encourage you to move beyond using implementation science principles to actually harmonizing some of the implementation science, thinking about standard measures of some of the organizational factors that will be used across these. I'm pretty much sure that it's not going to go as smoothly as you might think, even in these more naive networks that haven't started to do this. So really thinking about what is some mixed methods work that could be built in that would help you really understand the implementation process in a common way across all of the different research centers would be really, really valuable.
Thank you.
Mary Lou? Sorry.
I would vote for high touch over high. I would vote for high touch over high tech, and so I would like you to put a patient representative and a caregiver representative on your steering committee. Caregivers are kind of a lost group of people, and they care very much about this topic, and many times are having to manage it at home. So the other thing I would suggest to you is perhaps this is a place for a private-public partnership. There are an awful lot of industry people that are very concerned about this topic for obvious reasons and are looking at ways to keep patients taking drug, and that means symptom management for them.
Yes. As Dr. Singer will remind me, we have our partnership committee, and I've been in contact with them about potential partners. And definitely, this does not replace high touch. This is really more to facilitate high touch. And certainly technology would not be used to replace that. But thank you. Also, I very much appreciate your point about patient and caregiver representation on the steering committee. Thank you.
Electra?
So thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and I'm very excited about this. I want to underscore a couple of things that have been said and then raise another point. So I want to underscore what Karen just mentioned about implementation science. I think that really needs to be drawn out a lot more in this RFA because not everybody can do implementation science. And stepped wedge, I think, would be a really good design for this. And I agree with Karen that I think the timeline might be a little, need to be a little adjusted in reality. But this initiative right up front addresses minority and underserved populations, and that's great. However, the requirements for FHIR and OMAP might not be realistic in the clinics that you're looking towards including to address, minority and underserved. And really, if you're looking at this for implementation in the real world, I can tell you that a lot of the clinics that treat these people don't even know what FHIR and OMAP are. And so we need to really decide what we want to do. Do we want to do, the best, like the gold standard project, and maybe we will be able to address underserved, or do we really want to address underserved? Because if we are, we're going to have to deal with the issues of EHRs. And, I live in that world. I go in the communities and hear from clinics about what kind of EHRs they have. And FHIR and OMAP, they don't even know what that is.
May I?
Yes.
I very much agree with both the last two comments. And Mary Lou, I would say that the premise of this concept is not to choose between high touch and high tech, but in fact to integrate the two. And that's really the challenge. You touched on it well, Electra. The basis of needing these symptoms is, at a very high level, the recognition that they're out there and they're not being captured and they're not being turned into clinical care. And one of the things that we had talked about, I think gets to your point, Michael, particularly well, for these moonshot initiatives, under the overall goal of acceleration, then at some level I think you might have to make a choice between, are you going to narrow the focus, as you said, because a lot of the moving pieces of this are outside the control of the RFA and even the sites, and there are things that are happening outside of research. So you're going to narrow the focus and say, here's the one area, whether it's underserved, whether it's getting to those caregivers, whether it's looking at integration, or are you going to directly provide a platform? And that second part, if you provide the platform, then you try to equalize some of that variability on the outside. It's a theme that I saw in a couple of these moonshot initiatives, particularly at the coordinating center level. And I think more of a direct recognition of, as you said, Michael, the other things that are happening that can enable these would help your RFA be clear and help get a functional, feasible set of responses.
Yes, so
Michael.
just a comment. Do you use Google? When you want to find a restaurant, when you want to get to somebody's
Yes,
price.
yes.
Okay. Do you think people in your clinics use Google?
Well, it's
Just
not.
just a question.
Well, yes, but
Okay,
no,
so-
no, okay.
so the
In
best
Appalachia,
informatics-
they do not get internet. All right.
I bet you
so-
they all have mobile phones, and I bet you're all using those tools. So the point is, you have a coordinating center. The coordinating center should educate. The best informatics is the ones you don't even know is there. And that's what OMOP and FIRE do. They allow you to move information just like on the internet with basic standards. And if you're going to stand up a coordinating center, it should be their job to make sure those tools make it back to the way the data is collected. And it should be totally transparent to the users. I agree with you. We don't want people in the clinic learning OMOP and FIRE, but your coordinating center should.
Could I just make a quick comment on that? I know I'll be sensitive to time. You know, I think there's a tension here, as there's in a number of the RFAs, between some of the technical pieces, right, which you're addressing, and the workflow, right, changing the way that we practice. And I think that the two are very related because we use technology to practice, but they are misaligned, right? So I think that to accelerate this field, a question may be, you know what, maybe we want to create standalone technologies in order to really understand the workflow and to understand the barriers and the facilitators so that when the EHRs catch up, we're there, versus let's really focus on the technology. And I think the risk here is that we might get bogged down in the technology, although I completely agree with you about interoperability and universality, but I do think there's a risk.
Okay, I think we heard the discussion, so you heard the motion. It did get a second. So all those in favor? Against? Abstention? Okay.